Hello. Today we're going to talk about paraphrasing. In this lesson, we're going to learn 5 steps to good paraphrasing, tips and tricks for how to paraphrase even better, and at the end, we're going to have some practice. So let's get started. First, we're going to review the qualities of a good summary because paraphrasing is a really important skill in summarizing. So here are the qualities of a good summary, as we know. And paraphrasing is going to help us, of course, with number 4. Paraphrasing helps make sure that you are not copying from the original source, but you're saying it in your own words. So what is paraphrasing? The dictionary defines paraphrasing as a statement that says something that another person has said or written in a different way. So in other words, it's written in your own words, but without changing the original meaning. So you're not adding or removing anything from the original, but you're just saying it in a new way. So I know you're probably thinking, okay, that's great. I know what paraphrasing is, but how do I paraphrase, right? It's actually very easy, but I think if you know a few simple steps, it will really help you as you begin your paraphrasing journey. So step number 1 is to read the original several times. It's very, very important that you are very familiar with what you're reading and that you understand it. If you don't understand it, use resources like a dictionary or a friend to help you. The second is to take notes on key ideas, right? So especially if you're reading a longer thing that you need to paraphrase, make some notes about what's important. Step 3 is very important but hard to do, and that is to write what you remember without looking at the original. So if I'm reading something on my computer, I will turn the computer away from me and I'll write in my notebook what I remember. Or if I'm reading something in a book, I'll actually close the book and I'll write on my own, paraphrase what I remembered. I don't look at the original because it's too distracting. If I look at the original, I'm going to copy words and it's going to sound too similar. Step number 4 is also very important. After you've written your own version, right, your own paraphrase, you're going to compare that to the original. Look for phrases or words that are too similar, right? And this happens to the best of us. You never paraphrase and get it right the first time, but it takes a lot of comparing. And I found a funny meme on Instagram the other day. I hope you guys find it funny too. In the book, it says, he died in 1987. And maybe my paraphrase is, 1987 was when he died. Okay, obviously too similar, right? You're using all the same words, you just rearrange them a little bit. Okay, step 5 is to introduce the paraphrase using an author tag and a noun clause. This is something we learned in another video that talked about how to make an author tag, right? But here's an example. Samson argues that companies need to create a sense of belonging in the workplace in order to increase productivity and retention of employees. Samson argues is the author tag, and then the noun clause begins with that. After that, we have my paraphrase, which is the rest of the sentence. Lastly, very important in a paraphrase, we do not use quotation marks, right? A quotation mark is just for a direct quote, but because we're not using a direct quote, we're saying it in our own words, we shouldn't use quotation marks. Okay, I know what you're thinking. I can do all this, or I've done all this, but my paraphrase is still too similar to the original. What can I do? Never fear. I have a few more tips for you about how to write better paraphrases, especially when you're having some trouble. Tip number 1 is to use synonyms. And this is probably the number 1 thing students do, right? So you probably know this already, but I do want to show you a warning about using synonyms. Maybe the original quote says, money is the root of all evil, right? And my paraphrase, when I use the thesaurus to look up synonyms, My paraphrase is, cash is the rhizome of everything bad. How well do you think I did in this paraphrase? Not too well, right? The first question you may have is, what is a rhizome, right? A rhizome is a type of root, right? But it's a biological term. So maybe in biology class, this makes a lot of sense. But in this type of sentence, this doesn't make any sort of sense at all. Here, root is not talking about a physical root, like a root of a plant. It's talking about like the source, right? Or the reason why evil exists. So this is not a good synonym to use, right? In this context and also for this type of sentence. Cash is also a problem. This student probably looked for synonyms for money and they said, oh, cash is a synonym for money. But cash is a very non-academic term, right? It's a very casual term. And cash only means dollar bills, right? It doesn't mean like money in general. So it doesn't have the same meaning and it's non-academic. This is not a great paraphrase, even though I use synonyms because I didn't choose synonyms wisely. Here's a better paraphrase. Money is the main reason people do horrible things to each other. Now, this paraphrase and the original have the same meaning. They're talking about the same thing. And you might say, oh, will you use money and money is in the first sentence? Yes, sometimes that happens. Sometimes there's not a good synonym and that one word or two words you can't really change, and that's okay, right? The other thing I did change is the main reason. Instead of the root, the main reason people do horrible things to each other. Can you see in the original what horrible things is replacing? Evil, right? So this paraphrase is much, much better than my first attempt because I chose synonyms that were more fitting to the situation. Tip number 2, just flip it. You know how Nike says just do it, or they used to? Tip number 2 is just flip it. In a sentence, we can actually just flip the two parts. So in the original, I have two parts, one in orange and one in green. And I'm just going to flip the two parts. So I'll put the first one last and I'll put the last one first. So instead of don't give up, I say always persevere. I put the last part at the beginning of the sentence. And the first part of the original I'm putting at the end of the sentence. Again, I'm paraphrasing by using synonyms and other words that just have the same meaning. So just flip it is a really useful strategy, but just remember that you have to still change the words, right? You still have to put it in your own words. The third and final tip is to change sentence types. So we learned about simple, compound, and complex sentences. These are the 3 sentence types in English. And if you notice that one sentence is a simple sentence, for example, you could change it to a compound or complex sentence in the paraphrase, and this makes it really different from the original. Here's an original quote. We delight in the beauty of the butterfly, but rarely admit the changes it has gone through to achieve that beauty. A beautiful quote from Maya Angelou. Notice that the word but tells us that this is a compound sentence, right? So if I want to paraphrase, I have a couple different options. In my first option, I changed one compound sentence into 2 simple sentences, but I added this transition, however, at the beginning of the second sentence. Here's another option. The same compound sentence I have here, I could make into a different type of sentence, a complex sentence. Although people often admire how beautiful a butterfly is, they almost never consider the effort it took to become so beautiful. So again, changing sentence types, we can change from a simple to a compound to a complex or vice versa, right? Okay, so these are the 3 paraphrasing tips that we have talked about. The first one is use synonyms. Second one, just flip it. And third one, change sentence types, right? I'm going to show you some practice on the next page, and I'd like you to pause the video and try out 1, 2, or even 3 of these tips in order to paraphrase the quotes on the next page. So again, you can write them down, give yourself some notes, Here is the practice, okay? So for each quote, you're gonna paraphrase using 1, 2, or even 3 of the tips that we've learned about in this video, okay? All right, students, I hope that has helped, and I hope to see some amazing paraphrases in your next writing assignment.